go back 10 years ago, I was in crippling pain. You know, I was emotionally outbursts, you know, all these. I didn't enjoy the bleed at all. I felt it was a burden. I wanted to shut it off, you know. It wasn't something that I wanted to deal with. And then now fast forward, I'm like, oh, I love this phase. I feel like I'm just floating. The shadow side of this is we can walk around and really not think about anybody else in this week. We're feeling great, so why aren't you feeling great? Because I'm feeling great this week. Right? Our compassion levels drop.
Grace.
Hello.
When I watch back my guest episode, I start every episode with me giggling like a little girl, but hopefully that's like a representation of my joy that you're here. I'm starting with gratitude. My gorgeous community that have been here from the beginning. Gratitude is what grounds me. I'm grateful for you, not just for being here, but the fact, guys, today Grace has driven between yesterday and today. How many hours?
About 5.
Okay, just a casual 5 hours to be here for this episode live and in person. So I want to start our episode with gratitude to say thank you, because it means a lot, and I don't ever want to take those moments for granted, ever.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure. It's been really easy. It was so easy to get here. There was no traffic. The weather was amazing. It was just easy. So, you know, I always know it's meant to be when it's easy.
We are going to talk about that, because I feel like I truly think I'm going to learn a lot today. And it's funny because I had a conversation. There is so much this week that is just downloaded to me. It's been one of those weeks, lots of universe, but I'm not going to go off piece. I'm going to bring it back. I had a conversation on Monday with somebody, and they asked me, Amira, I've been wondering this question for a really long time, and I wanted to ask you. And he said to me, are you spiritual? Because I get this vibe from you and I get this energy. And it's funny because I guess I don't have too many labels of like how I identify myself anymore, because in the past it was like pretty harmful for me. But generally speaking, yeah, I'm a very energetic person. But when I'm with you and I'm grounded in your energy, I'm like, no, I'm not. And not in a comparison way at all. But you are so, I feel like, in your power and aligned. I'm like, Grace, teach me. Okay, so today is, I'm going to say, an episode for my beautiful females, but our videographer is male, so he's learning as we go too. So that also doesn't mean that if you're a guy in my community, switch this episode off. Because you might be in a relationship with a female. You may have a sister, a mum. So just because we are getting deep into the female operating system doesn't mean switch off this episode.
Absolutely. Amen to that.
Cute.
I think it's really great that men watch this. I really do. And actually, you'd be surprised how many men do tune in to conversations like this. You know, they do get juicy. And it's a way for a man to step into his power as well.
Now I'm excited for us to go there, because I think that it will explain so much as well. I love talking about relationships, whether it's romantic ones, whether it's a sibling one, a family one. I'm going to set our scene before we even get there, because I think there's going to be so much backstory that's going to help us, context, your expertise. So let's start with, I want to say basic, but I don't even know if that's fair, okay? Let's start with, as a female. Menstrual cycle, because I think you and I have spoken off air when we've chatted, and you are very, I'm going to describe, by the way, from my observations, so correct what's not right, very in tune with where you are in your cycle and aligning what you're doing according to that. And even us being here today, you thought about, okay, where am I going to be in my cycle? How am I going to be showing up? And I was like, Grace, tell me more. So kick us off with, what should we know? What's not taught to us in schools about our menstrual cycle? That's a very big question. So let's start with the phases. What are the phases of our menstrual cycle?
Okay, amazing. So obviously this is going out to women. This is not gender-based. This is anatomy-based. So this is going out to women who are born with wombs, right? And not even if you don't have a womb or you don't have a menstrual cycle, you are still connected to the moon phases, which governs our menstrual cycle.
Okay.
So whether you're menopausal, whether you're a child, whether you don't have a bleed, you still have a feminine rhythm within you. So that's just to clear that up. So this is also for everybody who wants to listen. And even if men want to know, you're also connected to the moons. So they can also sync with the moon cycle if they really want. So the 4 phases that I say are our phases of our menstrual cycle is we have the first phase, which is I go off like day 1 to 7. This is going on like a 28-day cycle. So if you have a longer cycle, if you have a shorter cycle, you can still work it out, but this is just generic.
Yeah.
So day 1 to 7 is your winter week. So that's based on the Earth's season of winter.
Okay.
Right? The cold, the dark, the shorter days. And I like to call this the womb woman. So you are womb woman in this phase.
Okay.
You are on your bleed. So your period comes day 1 of the womb woman phase.
Okay.
So your cycle starts on the day of your first day of your bleed.
Okay.
That's day 1. And you're in the womb woman phase. So this, lasts up to 7 days. And you are naturally so tired in this phase. Our energy levels are super low, less than 50% of what we usually have.
Okay.
And it's a time where, like in the winter, you want to retreat. You want to like stay in bed. You're a bit messy. You probably don't think you look very pretty. Your hair's probably not washed. You're in your sweats. Like you just feel like, you know what I'm talking about. And a lot of the time we don't allow ourselves to go there. So, that's a whole different story that perhaps I can just talk a little bit about after I've finished the phases. But a lot of us are taught to push through the winter week. So going to work, at school, we're taught that we should go and do PE because it's good for us to move our body when we're on our period. And sure, it's good to do a light exercise, but it's absolutely not good for your hormones if you are going to the gym and doing a full workout on your bleed. The natural way of the feminine would be that we would gather as women together on our bleed because we would all be bleeding at the same time. And we would, firstly, it started off in caves. So we would go to caves. This is like the birthing portal. We would give birth at the front of the cave. We would bury bodies at the back of the cave. The cave represents the yoni, the womb, the vaginal canal, right?
Okay.
So we would all gather together as women and go and free bleed. We would share intuition from this time. We would share our burdens. We would share our wisdom, our knowledge. We would share it with our children.
Okay.
And we would all start to just come into connection with each other in this really gentle, soft, resting time.
Okay.
Then that kind of went into like red tents and things like that, not actual red tents as such, but there would be like mud huts or things like that, and it still developed. Now, the time of your actual period is such a powerful time because you are shredding the old. So anyone listening, try and open your mind in this conversation to understand why you bleed, right? So the womb, the uterus is shedding.
Okay.
And it's moving through your cervix, which is naturally opening up, and moves through your vaginal canal and you bleed. Now, this blood is the only natural blood that comes from any human body that is not conflicted on by a wound.
Okay.
All of our blood comes from pain or wounds.
Okay.
So this is a sacred ritual that our body naturally does for us.
Okay.
So this actually detoxifies our entire body as women. We get a whole detox with our bleed.
Every month if we're going on that cycle.
Month. If we're working with the cycle, if we're resting in it, if we're allowing it to do its job, its natural job. It can release anxiety, toxins through the body. anything you've been holding, emotions, which is why people cry a lot on their menstrual cycle. You're releasing. Now, the men in the community, what they would do is they would come and bring us food on our menstrual cycle when all the women were together. They would protect us.
Okay.
They would, they would make sure we were all right. They knew this was a really sacred time. They honored a woman in her power of her blood and her bleed, because this is the thing that births all life, And so even back when we were doing this, the first places in, say, the villages that were burnt by the enemy were the red tents.
Okay.
That's how powerful they were. And so we have really, really deep intuitive gifts that can come through on this week of our cycle as well.
Okay.
And you're shredding the old so you can then begin to birth the new. So just like winter, we go in, and when spring comes, we feel it, don't we? Everyone feels it.
There's like a collective energy in the air. I'm biased as well, because spring for me is, for so many reasons, like in terms of season in the world, my favorite season of the year. For me as well, it very much feels like my new year. It's also my birthday. I'm an Aries. So there's so much for me energetically that aligns. But when we take it back to our cycle, you feel it. You literally feel, I'm going to speak on my behalf, right? Because I also feel that every individual goes through their cycle so differently, and experiences are so varied. So I just feel that me generalizing is not going to be helpful here. But for me, it's like, I'm a new human. Like, everything I thought I couldn't accomplish because I was being so low. And definitely for me, I'm incredibly emotional. Like, there's a huge release. And sometimes I think even last month, I like literally cried so hard. And I was like, why am I crying at that? But it was such a release, and it really made me reflect. But yeah, that spring energy in terms of our cycle, I'm like, I can accomplish anything.
Yeah, and actually, they say the new year is the 1st of January, and it's not.
I agree.
Yeah, the new year is the spring equinox.
Yep.
So, I mean, this is how out of rhythm we are, right? For a reason. So, so that week I would, and like you just said, I always call this the rose code. So with the work that I do, the rose code is there is no right or wrong way to bleed. There is no, worse or better. It is all perfect for you, however you are, whatever you go through. Some people are great on their bleed. I'm at a point now where my bleed is the most amount of bliss. Like, I feel like I'm walking on a cloud when I'm bleeding now. It's like I'm in this whole other realm world. Whereas go back 10 years ago, I was in crippling pain. I was emotionally outbursts, all these, I didn't enjoy the bleed at all. I felt it was a burden. I wanted to shut it off, it wasn't something that I wanted to deal with.
Yeah.
And then now fast forward, I'm like, I love this phase. I feel like I'm just floating, and it's taken time to get there, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, the spring phase, we go into, I call the delicate divine.
Okay.
So I always tell people, in the spring, all the babies are born, the baby animals. You see the little lambs, right? So this time of your cycle, you're really delicate like a baby lamb. You've literally just been rebirthed. You've come out of the womb cave. You're seeing the daylight again. It's colorful again. And it's where your strength meets your softness. So it can feel very conflicting in this week.
Okay.
Because we've come out of this cave. And it's like, when you've come out the dark for so long and your eyes have got to adjust.
Yeah.
We've got to adjust to this new energy that we're starting to feel again. The hormones are starting to change because this week is the week we move into ovulation.
Okay.
So that being said, actually the spring week is my most challenging week.
Okay, go
on. The
on.
week after my bleed.
Okay.
Personally, it's my most challenging because I am very creative in that week, and I want to go out and put all my creative work out into the world, and I want to do all the things. but I sometimes forget how delicate I still am. So this week I teach people that patience is the most important thing the week after your bleed. Patience. And it's the week where you might want to go book that holiday or do that thing, and you're impulsive.
Okay.
And you think it's the best thing to do. What I would always suggest is wait till your summer week.
Okay.
To do things like that. Also, anxiety levels rise pretty high the week after the bleed.
Okay.
This is because whether or not you want to have a baby or you are, actively trying to fall pregnant, your body thinks you are.
Okay.
So your body is moving into a place that thinks it's about to create a baby. So naturally, our primal instincts are like, can I afford this baby? Am I doing all the right things? Is my partner suitable? Am I okay? Can I look after this? Am I living in the right place? So what women don't realize is some of the anxiety is coming from this primal instinct that your body wants to co-create and bring life into the world.
Okay.
So when you can recognize that, you can go, wow, okay, like, is this a necessary anxiety to be feeling right now?
Okay.
Is this really necessary? Is this part of my primal that wants to just control everything and make sure everything's perfect? And so this is a difficult week for me because I don't have children yet. Obviously, I do want to have children. And I have these anxieties that come up about it. And it might be with women who have got children. Am I a good enough parent? Am I doing this right? Does a sibling want another sibling? Like, we have to remember our natural, primal, hormonal energy.
Yeah. And I'm doing my absolute best to like not interrupt you too much at this stage, because I thought let's go through the stages and then I'm gonna like break things down, and we're definitely gonna come back to in terms of that winter week and pushing through, because we have so much to say on that, right? But really it sounds like as well then in that spring week, it's really interesting hearing it from your perspective, because I'm naturally, as I'm listening to you, thinking about my own experience and of my cycle, and I feel that I'm insanely aware of it, and I always have been, but it's definitely shifted as I've grown and kind of learned a bit more. But it really feels then that like something to be mindful of in that spring week is that inner dialogue. And my community, I know you're fed up of me talking about it, but it's always going to be my starting place, right? It's that inner dialogue. It's where is that doubt creeping in? Where is that voice a little bit louder? Okay. And I think you've given us such beautiful examples that no matter who you are, what stage you are in your life, that inner dialogue is just going to take on different forms potentially in that week. And I think it's made me smile, because I'm in my spring week now and I've had a beautiful one, but it's beautiful for so many reasons, because I've been able to do things with a different approach, which I've been trying to master for so long. So I'm like really deeply proud of myself. But it's funny because at the beginning of the week, where I was kind of coming out of winter and going into spring, I can really trace back to like some of my inner dialogue. And I was like, all right, makes sense now.
Yeah, your crossover days are really important to know your crossover days. They're going to be like the internal shifts that are quite difficult sometimes and quite challenging when we're shifting.
Yes. And I was going to say, just before we go into the next two phases, I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more, because I'm going to literally deep dive us into it. It's so much here, okay? But I know when we framed this conversation at the beginning around, guys, don't switch off, okay? And I'm thinking about like, my partner, he's actually at a stage where he more or less can predict where I'm at in my cycle. But I also just like, one, I'm learning so much from you now, and I'm pretty sure like our communities are going to be the same. But until like we get to a space where we can understand that about ourselves, it's then a whole entire different ball game for our partner or somebody else on the receiving end, even if it's your family, you don't live with your partner. To understand then your phases, what stage you're at. And I'm not saying that like everyone needs to know each other's like deep dive, but I think when there's an awareness, and it's really funny because you've reminded me actually of a conversation I overheard probably like a month or so ago, and I was working in a coffee shop. Everyone knows it's my creative space. I've got my couple of spots that I love to go to. It's where I really flow. And there was a group of teenage girls. They were going through, I think, either their GCSEs or their A-levels. I think their A-levels. And I giggled so much throughout their whole entire conversation. One, it took me back to being their age, but one of them called the other one out. I was like, you're just being like this and snapping and getting agitated because you're on your period, so stop. But it just reminds me of like what we're talking about, because, and they were all female sitting there and they knew each other really well, and it was such a beautiful conversation to overhear. But it's just the awareness of like, all right, well, where are we in that phase of our cycle? How do we then come across? And I think similar to you, actually, if I think back to definitely my teenage years, I had a hard time with it, but my mood swings were out of control. And over the years, I've been able to like navigate that and lean into it. And there's so much more we're going to unpack, because even when you talk about like the softness, I'm like, oh, Grace. But anyway, I'm just interjecting halfway through that. Let's go through the cycle.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing it all. It's nice to get to know you a bit deeper as well. And like you said, we're all different, and it is really important, if you're in partnership in a union, that you do have these open, honest conversations, because why not? It has not been working. Ignoring this, we're at a point where we know it's not working. Women's wombs are literally screaming out in pain. These conversations need to be had with your partners. And, you know, for me, it's a non-negotiable, you know, like it's a boundary that I'm born with a womb. I'm a woman. I know my place, and that's part of my power. So if my partner is ignoring that or unable to hold that, well, he's not aligned to my truth. So it's something that I think we should all lean into ourselves first, learn about ourselves first. Then we can communicate it with our partner as and when things come up. It's not like sitting him down and saying, rah, 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 rah. It's like, babe, like, I'm in this phase of my cycle, feeling really delicate, you know, this week. Feeling a bit anxious because of this, and I know where it's coming from. Like, any suggestions, or, you know, you want to do something together that's, you know, that's going to shift this energy, or, you know, there could be many things. And eventually he'll start to also understand your rhythm. Yes. And one thing that some women might disagree with me on this, and this is going to mean having a little look at perhaps where sometimes we hold the blame, but ultimately, the great mothers who birthed us all, birthed the universe, us with wombs as women, we birth every human species on this earth. Right? So there is no argument when it comes to the womb. Like, that's absolute fact. And it's like the concept is when you come back to that power as a woman that you birth all life, it's our responsibility to start asking what we're birthing. It's our responsibility to sit and ask, how am I worshipping myself? Am I blaming men for treating me XYZ when I'm not worshipping the one thing that births all life? And ultimately, a woman is going to birth new realities. For example, if her cycle is, you know, on that spring week, like I just said, birthing a new reality is birthing something like a new conversation. That's what I mean by birthing a new reality. Nice. It's birthing a new conversation with your partner to say, this is where I'm at. You birth your reality. Beautiful. And so it's our responsibility to do that. It's not men's responsibility to do that.
I support this so incredibly deeply, because I cannot stress how much I hear. Like, even I had to stop myself, especially when I'm working in a coffee shop and I can hear like the table next to me. I'm like, Amira, they don't know you. Please butt out of their conversation. But the amount of times I hear, and we're talking about this very much in the context of our conversation today, how many times I hear females blame men or come with a generalization or a sweeping statement. I can't trust men. See, that's why I can't open up. And I had a conversation actually yesterday with somebody, and they were really, really open in terms of where they're at in their relationship. Yeah. And the expectation of what they wanted from their partner, who's a guy, was out of this world. And I said, okay, but right now what you're doing, you're aware of your trauma, which amazing, right? A little bit more of a deep dive needed around relationship programming. But then you're putting all of that onto the other person and expecting them to process, hold space for you, but you haven't learned how to do that for yourself. And I think the biggest thing that I've just taken away from what you said and can really, really reiterate is, okay, the responsibility comes back to ourselves, right? And this carries through in so many different levels, conversations, relationships, okay? If you're blaming, if you're pointing the finger, particularly in this scenario in terms of your partner or guys or the opposite sex, it's a no-go, right? It's about, how am I taking ownership? I loved when you said, how am I worshipping myself first?
Exactly. And love everything you just said again. And yeah, the one question I would say to people listening to this is, yeah, you've got expectations of this man or this relationship. What's the expectation from yourself?
Ooh, I love that.
Because it all comes back to your menstrual cycle as well. Are you over pushing in your winter week where you're expecting too much from yourself? Are you expecting yourself to have no emotions on your bleed? Are you expecting to be the same every day? Because when we hold them expectations of ourselves, that all linked to our menstrual cycle and our womb, we hold that expectation with other people. And it's really coming back to that primal gift we were given. It is not a burden to have a womb and a menstrual cycle. It's a pleasure to be a woman. Like God gave us that pleasure to be able to birth new life and new reality. A man's job is to support us in that, right? It is his job to support us in that. Ultimately, we as women, the way the world is now, it's our duty. And if you don't want to take responsibility for this, absolutely fine. I do. I know plenty of women that do. But it's going to be our responsibility to come back to ourselves, to worship ourselves as women so we can worship other women. And that, what that does is it helps men step up into that supportive role. That is what is going to birth the men to step up, is by us just taking a step down into the womb. That's not giving your power away to a man. That's not saying be controlled. That's not saying being dominated. That's saying, I know my power as a woman. I worship myself. Now I am allowing you and giving you permission to also be a part of this with me, to support me in it. And you'll see him elevate. It's almost like women have... because we're the birthers, because everything comes from like the creation of us, it's sort of like we initiate men to step up, or we don't.
This is, I'm listening so intently. That sounds like I don't for the rest of the episode, right? But because I love when you framed it and said, all right, some people are going to agree with this, some people aren't. Like, I know lots of women that do honor this, and I do it as well. And I think if I take a personal example for me, I spent so long believing like I had to do it all, be everything. And actually, there's pros and cons to absolutely everything. And it's all around your filter and your lens and like the nuance and context around it. But by me doing that, it hasn't served me well. And then you don't create that space. And I think one thing I was really against for a very long time, which I'm not going to go into now why, but there's lots of reasons for it, is as a female... I'm going to say this out loud. I'm like, do I want to say this out loud? Yeah,
you're safe. You're safe with me.
That like, I can do it just as good as you. And I had a recent conversation around masculine and feminine energy, how we like kind of get that balance, right? So without us going too much into that area, but I think what you've been able to describe beautifully is how do we honor ourselves? And by not trying to, I'm going to use me here, like force or push or do it all, it then creates that space where in that relationship, for example, you allow the other person to support. And I really like where you've made the distinction between, we're not saying you're giving away power. Whereas for me, I can definitely say previous version of me would have felt like, no, like, why do I need to rely on you? Like, what are you going to do for me? I can do it for myself, which is actually can be extremely unhealthy and extremely harmful. And to understand that you're creating space and what are both of your roles within that. And I really love the distinction because it's a completely different ball game if we're going to like control or giving away our power. And I think that, I know we'll get onto this a bit more, but in terms of the way that society operates today, then there is that energy to push and We'll talk about it in a little bit, like
Yeah.
how to actually manage those those stages of the cycle.
Well, thank you for speaking your truth, because there is going to be so many women, including me. I can do it better than you.
I'm sorry, guys.
And I see it all the time, and that's why women come to me, because the easiest and most natural way to drop down and begin to be aware of where you might be over controlling or pushing or not relaxing or asking for support is your menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
It is like your golden map. It's going to show you where you need help, how to ask for help, where you don't need help.
Yes.
And the roles between relationships are always going to shift in dynamic, right? They're always going to shift. There's no better or worse or right or wrong. But the primal energy of the female is to rebirth, and the natural energy and primal energy of a man is to support. So,
and I think as well, sorry to interrupt you, but I was just going to say on that point, and I think because of the way society operates now, that balance is out of shift.
Oh, yeah.
And because we're so far away from it,
yeah,
it's actually like, how can we come back to that?
Oh, yeah. Well, we can get onto that. We have a lot to say about the patriarchy, absolutely. And yeah, so it's a beautiful cycle to, you know, it helps with work, it helps with your children, it helps with your friends, it helps with everything, not just, you know, romantic relationship.
Yeah.
But yeah, we then go into the summer week, right? Your ovulation week. And wow, this is called the lady in red phase.
Okay.
So like you've got your heels on, your hair's done, your makeup's done. Like you can do anything this week. You're at optimal energetic level.
Okay.
You've got things booked in your calendar. You probably want to do more. You've got this beautiful full moon energy. So think of the full moon. She's bright. She's in the sky. You look up the sky and she's like a magnet. And she's not hiding, right? She is not hiding her light. She is full and big and like she's like, look at me. I'm gorgeous.
Okay.
This is us in our ovulation phase. One, primarily because we are seeking out a male.
Okay.
So naturally, we're given this energy at this time. Our pheromones rise to be able to co-create.
Okay.
So we have this really gorgeous, bright energy. But in every phase of our energy, we have the light and the dark. So we have the side behind the moon, right?
Okay.
The shadow side of this is we can walk around and really not think about anybody else in this week. We're feeling great. So why aren't you feeling great? Because I'm feeling great this week, right? Our compassion levels drop.
Okay.
We also have an inner critic that comes up this week. And this is the inner critic of, am I too much?
Oh, okay.
Will I be shut out, left, abandoned, even primal, killed for showing myself in my light? You just gave us a perfect example a moment ago when you said, shall I say this? So it's like when we are in that week, there is so much we want to shine, but sometimes we're being asked, what are we not stepping into that week? What is the part of us that we are not shining?
Yes.
Why? Why aren't you doing that thing? Why aren't you shining that light? Because the moon doesn't question it. She's just shining it.
Yeah.
So you can look at this phase sometimes and elevate really well in this week.
Okay.
Because you're actually more emotionally stable in this week too.
Okay.
So questioning those things doesn't feel as heavy.
Nice. I really like
that. You know?
Yeah. And I was going to say, I love the way that you've described, I say pros and cons. You can tell that I come in it from such a practical perspective. Yes. But when you talk about the light and the dark, and and I think that's go to like laws of the universe, and there has to be like an equal and an opposite, right? That's how the universe and the world works. So I think that's a really beautiful thing to remember as we go through each of those phases, that this, I think, whole piece as well is around like your awareness and helping you understand you and your body better, and that hopefully get into a space where you can like master it, but understanding that could look different like month to month or from one bleed to another, but understanding that there will be some months where that summer week, you're going to be shining and amazing, but notice then where that critic comes up. And I think being aware of both sides is really important.
Very.
Sometimes otherwise we're boxing it in and saying, this is definitely how you're going to feel in this week, and make sure you do this in this phase of your cycle. So I'm going to let you finish. I had so many questions pinging off, and I was like, no, we're going to finish the phase 4. And then I feel like there's a question around your cycle as a whole, working with today's world. So I'm going to pause that there and let you continue.
Amazing. And anyone in a relationship as well, this is very interesting. So when you're in that phase of ovulation where you've got that higher energy and things like that, obviously be careful, guys, because your sex drive is going to be much higher. So if you don't want to get pregnant, just please be aware of your ovulation days. If you're on natural cycles, you can take your temperature. Just be really aware of the ovulation days. When you get in sync with your cycle, you'll know anyway. But also, I had a client once, and we were going through this summer week. Oh my goodness, this week, the week we did together, changed her life. She actually ended up booking on to a course, and now she's qualified in Reiki healing because she just owned that part. She was like, I'm not afraid anymore. We went through the fears together of that full moon darkness, and she came out brighter, right? This week was really interesting. She said to me, oh, my boyfriend had like a bad knee. And she was like, oh, just, sure, it's not that bad. Just, you'll be all right.
Get on with it.
Get on with it. And I stopped her there and I was like, okay, so your boyfriend's come to you with this, problem, and he wants a bit of attention. I said, you're all in your stuff right now because you're full moon. You're full mooning. You're in your lady in red phase. Where can you give him some of your energy? You're a full overflowing cup.
Beautiful.
Is there space to give him something this week? Like, if you fill him up this week, guess what happens next week when you go into your premenstrual cycle phase?
Yeah.
He's overflowing enough to give you some more energy. And I think it's just really important with our family and relationships in that lady in red phase to just give that a little bit extra to our men. Whether it's like, just give him a massage, cook him some nice food, ask him how it is, whatever it is. You have the capacity to overgive that week, only if, though, you're following your cycle.
Okay.
You can still be burnt out in your lady in red phase if you're burning out on your bleed, you know?
Yeah.
You only feel optimal energetic level in your lady in red phase if you're honoring the rest of your bleed.
Yes. Okay, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, otherwise you're going to be up, down, all over the place pretty much your entire cycle.
Yeah.
So obviously then we go into Divine Diva, which is the week before you bleed, right? This is where rage comes up, you're angry, you're emotional, you're jealous, push, pull, don't want to see you, get out my face, where are you going? It's like, if you heard Justin Bieber's song, What Do You Mean? It's like,
that is such...
It's like, what do you mean?
Spot on.
Like, it's Divine Diva stage, Justin, that's all it is. We don't know what we want in this phase.
Apologies to everyone on the receiving end.
Yeah, and this is the week where you can learn huge self-mastery as women, because this is a week where we are a mess. This is like messy week.
Okay.
We don't feel good enough. That jealousy stuff can come up. This is also the week of the cycle that's going to bring all your past relationship stuff up.
Okay.
Traumas, unhealed wounds, unresolved wounds. It's going to be the week where you are literally being shown, and through emotions and through your body and through anything, what needs to have the light shined on it.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because the womb wants to release it for you in the next phase of the bleed. So it's bringing it up for you, so you're aware of it, and then you're aware, oh, this bleed is releasing that for me.
And it comes right back to the awareness of understanding, like, for that month or that cycle, what do you need to release? And I think that is such a piece around listening. And I'm going to say from my perspective, like all of that work isn't easy. Like whenever you're doing anything to do with yourself, about you, your awareness, understanding that, like it's not easy, but it's there for a reason, and it's encouraging you to say, okay, look, like what is it? And it's really funny because I think even a couple of weeks ago when I was like in that phase, and I'm a lot more in tune now.
Yeah.
So as you describe it, I can sit there and be like, oh yeah, I understand that like release of emotion, and it brought up something else, and I was like, oh, but I was able to really ride with that and go with it. And it reminds me when you said earlier around the way you approached your cycle 10 years ago is completely different to the way that you look and manage it now, and the emotions that come up within those phases. And actually being able to look at it as, all right, the more you learn about it, the more it's going to help you and help you make those decisions in life, in your relationships, understanding yourself. Where does that compassion need to come in a little bit more? So even going back to that summer week, all right, you're shining. Okay, the compassion's a little bit low. Where are you being mindful of that? And I love that because I just think it gives us so much to actually dive into as females. And also, I just think because there's a lot there, and there's so many things I want to kind of pull out and ask before I even think about moving our conversation on, okay? But also, like, if you can just identify like one of your phases that feels the hardest.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'd say start there, but what would you say?
Yeah, I would agree. I would say look at your cycle that's screaming out to you the most. What phase? Usually it's the week before you bleed, because this is where headaches, migraines, premenstrual pain, emotions, emotional outbursts, rage, anger, that kind of stuff. We call it ugly head, right? But I think what this part of the cycle does for us as women is it helps us accept that we are not the same, and it's okay to be a mess, and you don't have to be perfect, and you can be angry and jealous. And these are natural emotions that society tells us we're not allowed to feel, because that means we're not going to be loved or liked or accepted. It means we're going to be left. When we can actually start to love ourselves in our mess and our mess of our bleed, you know, the blood is red for a reason. The blood flows messy for a reason. It's because we're also messy. Females are not designed to be consistent and perfect. You know, we're designed with an ebb and flow. We're designed with these hormones, these changes, and looking at that phase of the cycle, which is causing you the most distress, is going to be the perfect starting point. What a great question. Yeah.
Thank you. On that note, because I feel like this has been like at the tip of my tongue from the whole entire time that we've been talking so far, I think that if we as females can get to that space to understand that we're not supposed to be consistent, it's okay for us to ebb and flow, it's really empowering. But I can imagine that we have got some wonderful people listening and saying, great guys, love that. I've learned so much. But in the way that like my life is structured and what, let's just say like society is expecting of me, I can't go and like design my life around my cycle. And the reason I ask that question as well is I'd say that I'm in like a lot better space with it when I'm so aware of it. I've got so much more to learn, and it doesn't mean that it's done at all. But my life works a lot better when I listen to it and I'm aware. And we'll come back to the pushing phase as well, because I just feel that's quite like a prominent thing that would be beautiful for us to pull out. But for anyone that's feeling like great, thanks guys, thanks Grace, learned so much, but I can't design my life around that cycle. Like it doesn't allow me, society doesn't give me permission. How would you respond?
Great question. Great question. Okay, well, firstly, if we're dealing with the word can't, that's a limiting belief in itself. So you want to pluck out the word, where can I start?
Beautiful.
Where can I begin? Because there is a can in this. If you have a 9 to 5 and you have children, you still have the ability to slowly over time just start shifting gently. It doesn't mean you have to go in full force and be like, this, and this. Take your time with just addressing your cycle. Listen to more podcasts, read more books, start to become aware of it, start to implement the small boundaries, right? So many women people please, and so many women feel like their boundaries are always being crossed. the menstrual cycle awareness and also being in contact with your womb like that really helps you start putting new boundaries in naturally.
Yeah.
For example, if you're a mother and you're on your bleed, just ask for help for like an hour.
Lovely.
Of that day. The first day you come on your bleed, just ask for help for an hour, like your sister, your friend. It will even benefit you to come and pay somebody to help look after the kids for an hour. Like, that's how important a little bit of rest is on your bleed. And try and just find people who are supporting you in that. And eventually you can help your friends support in that. If you're bleeding at different times, it's like, do you know what? I'll look after the kids for an hour. You just go have a lie down.
Yeah.
It's working with your community. So firstly, it's like, who are you around? Who is supporting you? Who in your life is, nourishing you? Who wants to help you? And are you doing that vice versa? So again, it all comes down to your responsibility of what you're allowing and being involved in your life for this to truly manifest.
I love this for so many reasons. And somebody actually slid into the DMs this week. I can't remember what I was talking about. They commented and they said, but Amira, surely it also really matters around like who you're around and your network and your support and your energy. And I'm like, yes, like 1,000,000% yes. And that doesn't mean the people around you right now aren't healthy or aren't helpful. But as like relationships change, yes, it goes vice versa as well. And in this particular situation, right, where can you offer support and where do you need it? But exactly as you said, when we're stepping into that people-pleasing space that feels way too familiar, right, and it's so habitual for so many people. Okay, I love that you gave the example, like start small. Where can you ask for help for just an hour? Not for the whole entire day even, but start really small. And it is then about, and I feel like I probably see this a lot with my clients, because the ones that are able to really thrive have a support network around them. Yes, we're co-creating together, but what you do outside of our sessions is just as important, probably if not so more important, because I don't get to live your life with you. I'm your coach. Therefore, like that network, that support of energy of people that's aligned with you, it doesn't mean the same person, is incredibly important. So I'm just stressing what you said, really.
Yeah,
I'm emphasizing
I love that. I love how you said it with clients as well, because one of my core values is responsibility. You can come and work with me for 6 months. If you're not taking responsibility for your life, how are you integrating that into your life, and this isn't easy. I might be coming across like quite strong, and I know it's not easy. Take your time, ask for help, join communities. I have a free online community that I do, I do a red tent every 6 weeks where women to get together and we share this and we support each other. There's so many things out there, but like you said, it's when you have the belief that I can't. Yeah. So it's really asking yourself, where is your can't coming from? What story have you got behind that? Like, how has that come about? Or is there somebody telling you that you can't? And I love that you talk about society, because, I'm really deep in this right now, and it really like sets me on fire when I talk about the society piece, because we live in this patriarchal society that has cut us off from our wombs and cycle for about 2,000-3,000 years. And it all dates back to, like the Roman Empire and religion and, really trying to change this system in order to create this sort of distorted masculine power. And we're all born into that right now. So there is no one's fault. And I really want to stress that a lot. This is not men's fault. It's not women's fault or anyone in between. This is society that has built a structure and a system to keep us separated. Because when a man and a woman comes into union, like we've just said, the birth and the support, we stop trying to look outside of ourselves. And the system is designed for us to look outside of ourselves, to think that the power is not actually within. The system is designed so we get power from outside of us. And that's where my like spiritual kind of faith lies in my life, that I'm so devoted to like daily, because I know I can access the power within myself. So accessing the power of yourself might look like going back to your menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
Because at 15, 14 years old, the majority of us are put on the pill. Now, again, not against anyone who has been on or is on birth control, but I absolutely, vitally ask you to have a look at what the pill does to your body, because it's stopping you from ovulating. It's your pheromones are not the same. So there's a lot of studies that have been taken out now that if you're with your partner for 15 years and you've been on the pill and you come off the pill, your pheromones change. You can't stand the smell of each other. People are breaking up. So it's actually stopping you from ovulating. It's actually stopping that really core, feminine, natural, primal energy that is in the womb. It's disrupting your nervous system. And it's also creating disconnect. So it might stop you from having the emotional outbursts or the pain. But they're the things that we need in order to grow, heal, learn. And so I believe society has absolutely trapped women into believing that that's what we need in order to survive in this world. Because we're driven by the 24-hour clock, because it's a 9 to 5 24-hour clock that actually assists men, not the female rhythm. Women internalize that and can think they're doing something wrong or they're not good enough because they can't keep up. So the pill is a really great way to mask it and to keep going. And also, you know, we've been kind of also programmed to believe that it's a nuisance. We almost can create our own problems, like with the placebo effect. How many problems do you actually have before your bleed? Or is it because somebody's telling you you're a problem or telling you that you're crazy on that week? How many times do we hear that from growing up? Oh, your mom's just due on a period. She's crazy woman. So you have that program and that system belief in you that that's what you are, when really is who told you that? Who told you that's the way that you are? Obviously, we do have the hormonal there, but to what point does it go beyond, you know? And I feel like society, my belief is that it's the matrix system that keeps us enslaved.
And I think as well there, two things I guess that have just like spoken so loudly to me around, without me getting into it, but like the pill, right? And in terms of when you said, I'm not saying it's good and I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just encouraging you to ask yourself, what perhaps is it stopping or is it suppressing? Which two things. One, my big thing, I have a huge entire piece around the education piece, whether it's around sex, whether it's around our cycle, whether it's around our womb. And for so many of us, I'm definitely going to say like this kind of generation, we weren't taught that at school. And so yes, it is about figuring it out in adulthood. And I truly hope one day I get to like redesign sex education, because I've got such a thing about it around giving us the tools. And there's so many layers to it, whether it, regardless of like your gender, your experience, getting pregnant, everything. So without me diverting there. So I thought that's incredibly important. And I think asking yourself and being able to reflect. And the other thing as well, when you brought up the pill, where I feel like it's gone against what we've been talking earlier, is suppressing. And when you said, I embrace bleeding, like I'm okay with it now, but it's also then being okay with that messy middle. So I just feel that it reinforced what we've been talking about, and where the pill, for example, I feel like I'm focusing so much on that point, but in terms of society in the bigger picture, is stopping us ovulating. Okay, so what else is it helping us suppress? Why are we not okay with being emotional, right? Like, why is that such a bad thing? I mean, I have a whole entire business talking about open up, expressing and emotions, okay? Yes, there is, of course, I have to say this because I have to give the other side of, I'm not saying you need to talk about everything and express every emotion, especially to your partner. There is a line where that becomes too much. But for the most part, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the other side of the spectrum. So I just think there's a really important piece there in terms of like giving yourself permission and really kind of looking inwards to say, what have been told? Like, are they my adopted beliefs rather than what I really truly believe about myself?
Exactly. Thank you for sharing. And not blaming yourself or anyone. We want to blame society, other people. You've got to try and forgive as well. But also, don't be naive to the system. I was naive to the system for so long. Like, don't be naive to the system. Your power lives within you. Like, don't be naive that we're given the pill at 15 years old. Like, you say about the sex education, right? Why aren't we educated sexually? To create shame internally within us, because shame is the lowest form of anything that we can be living in. So we go and make these decisions because we're not taught, that create so much shame, and we get stuck there. And one of my mentors actually that I went to in France, she actually believes that shame is actually man-made.
Okay.
She believes it's actually a man-made belief system that isn't even on the spectrum of emotions. If you think about what grief feels like, sorrow feels like, anger feels like, it's like they're so different to shame. Shame feels like plastic. It feels like it's like a container for all of those things to go in. And I think when we can start to really lean into the shame part, that's when we begin to get our power back, right? But when we're sovereign beings of power, the system cannot carry on how it's carrying on. Like it can't. It's built on those structures. So, you know, it is being open-minded to actually start asking the questions of, why was I told to ignore my period from when I was a kid?
Yeah.
Why have I been told that my emotions are messy and wrong? You know, no wonder so many women are growing up that are absolutely in fear of their own emotions and also feeling so unworthy. Because what does unworthiness account for? No power. No power. So you have to look at the cycle to just start to remember who you are, not to fix yourself. Just remember who you are, who you were born to be, who you were given that gift, you know, and it's up to us to start doing that. You know, it's going to take courage. It's going to be, you know, saying no to things and saying no to the system. And that might mean like, I can't get that paycheck next week. But I trust you when you are in your power and when you're in your sovereignty, and, you know, if you have faith and you pray, that will come forth for you. Like it has to. There's no other way.
And I think there's a lot as well, a piece around trust there that comes. And I know we're talking about like quite big things, and there's a lot of like details around that, which I'm not going to put into like a full entire podcast episode, that allows you to kind of work through that. And it reminded me actually, I've got a situation at the moment where something's like not aligned. It was aligned and now it's not so aligned. And I'm very now okay. I'm going to go and say no to it next week. But there's things around it that have happened that I'm like, this doesn't align anymore. And I'm having to work around or do something differently in a way to accommodate how somebody else feels. I have to be so careful in the way I'm saying it because it sounds like I'm not willing to adapt, and that's not it. But when you talk about understanding your power and that you can say no, for example, if it's to a paycheck, and know that, but when you do, there's going to be a game changer.
Yeah.
And for me, this situation is essentially like a reflection of that, to be like, I'm okay to say no. Like, and it's like, if you look at it on paper, it will look awesome. But I'm so in my power to be like, hey, I'm okay to walk away from it. And that this week, like that only kind of came to fruition this week. And I was like, that feels so good.
Yes.
Like it feels so good to be like, hey, yeah, I know it looks good on paper, but I don't need it. It's not coming from that lack energy.
You're not bending around or, you know, fitting in, are you? You're not people pleasing. So this might be difficult for some people to understand or look at as selfish, but ultimately I ask myself these things if I'm making a decision. Does it feel pleasurable?
Nice.
Is it purposeful? And is it part of my passion? And when you make a decision on those 3 things, it's an aligned decision.
Yes.
You know that it's either a straight no or a straight yes. If there's some doubt, there's usually part of your body that's like, Grace, rethink that one, or sit in some meditation or pray on that one. Just pray for some guidance and see what comes through, and trust that the right thing is going to come to fruition. And so I think that's really important, is find out what your values are. If you're walking around life when you don't know your values, I mean,
I'm smiling because
come on.
I think I did a solo episode this week where I literally banged on about it. My clients are going to be so fed up of me. But it's because if I'm going to generalize though, we don't, but most people, I am generalizing, okay? My clients feel so excluded from this as I force them to do it. But so many of us don't know what our values are.
I didn't for so long.
Right? And then you don't know how to also get to that place. And I'm so against tick box exercises. So my pet hate is like, oh, here's 100 values. Go pick. No. And it goes back to what you said. And I really just want to pull this together because it's one of my favorite quotes, is that like, you have the power within you, the answers are inside. There's a different version of it. I've like paraphrased it. But when I realize that and tap into that energy, it's like incredible. And that's where your values come from. Guys, they are already within you. You don't need to pick them from 100. If you got more than 5, I'm telling you, you either duplicated them or you're not going to remember them. So pause, right? That's your sign. But you're so right that get in touch with them. And I guess the other thing I was going to add on to that as well is to say, when I love those 3 questions because I love a little bit of a practical approach. I think it's so helpful, especially when you're listening to an episode and you're like, right, great, I understand, but now what do I do? And the other piece of that I was going to say is beautiful is, yes, for the most part, we want to be making aligned decisions. But if you don't, like if you're making an exception to the rule, that's okay.
Yes.
But know why. So know why you're willing to step out of alignment and know exactly how you get back into it. And if you can do that, then it's a game changer.
It's a game changer because you're taking responsibility for your decision, right?
Yeah.
Because you know the why. You know that whatever outcome this is, I got this. I'm in my power. I can deal with this. Yeah, it might be an exception to my values right now. Okay, I'm going to make this decision. Maybe it's a bit of a risky one.
Yes.
Also, we can't be too hard on ourselves all the time. You know, we're humans. I always say, you know, we're all spiritual beings, you know, having a human experience. Like there's every single one of us has a soul, has a spirit. So we can always tap into that. Again, it's, you know, it's something that we've been taught is outside of us. Like people think God is outside of us. Actually, God is the light that pours through us. It's, again, we've been taught through patriarchy and different types of religion and Christianity and Catholicism that it's something to be afraid of because we're giving our power away. And that was done on purpose again. So we pay into that. So we forget our own true power. So that's why so many people are afraid to really truly step into worshiping themselves or to step into their own belief of what faith is, whether this is the Buddha, whether this is Christ, whether this is, I don't know, the universe, whatever you want to call it. If you are manifesting, if you're someone listening right now that manifests, you have faith, by the way. You are praying when you're manifesting. Manifesting is prayer. You must believe in something that is flowing through you in order for you to feel like you have the ability to manifest.
I think that's important because I think my community will know that I try and use as much vocabulary around this so that people can find something that relates to them. And I'm very much against like a one size fits all. Like I don't coach in that way. It's really about awareness and understanding you. And I'm a really, really big believer that if we can all understand how to communicate with ourselves, then it's going to enhance the world that we live in, the relationships that we have, how we feel going through life, right? We're getting very deep here. So when it comes to that, I think I've said it on a solo episode before that if you believe you're going through life without some sort of higher power, define that higher power, however it feels natural for you, But if you truly feel like it's only you, you're going to have a really hard time going through life, because it's actually such a relief, or this is how I describe it as well. It's a relief to know that there's something else either flowing through you, guiding you, whatever it is, where you feel supported. Is actually like a little bit of reassurance. Like, step back, you don't have to do it all. So I know that, like, because I think as soon as we say the word like faith or trust or like universe or God, it can really switch people off. And I just want to invite you, I feel like you bring out my real spiritual side. I just want to invite you to question it and find a way that it works for you, and don't feel that you have to force or conform.
Yeah. And if anyone is afraid of the word God, know that that's normal, because we are literally told to be afraid of God. And see it as this. I see God as good light, godlike, good light. It's something that's within you. It's the universal light that exists within you as a soul being. Like, if you explain love, you can't explain what love is. You can't logistically explain what love is, because love is not linear. Love is not linear. Love is from a soul. We all have the soul. So firstly, like you said, just relax into what you feel called is your faith. It could be like a beautiful flower that is your point that of faith, where or a color, or walking out in nature or something like that. There's so many different ways to describe how we access our true inner power, other than all the things like praying and meditation, which might be extreme for some people. And those who are listening that would like to perhaps pray or use their words to sing over their life, just mantras or prayers or affirmations you can see as a prayer. You can start to lean into it being more softer for you, so it's not so intrusive. But one quote from the Bible I love is, what's it say? It says, when you believe, you will receive what you ask for in prayer. And that's just a beautiful way to know that when you are speaking them words, because your voice has power.
Yes, it does.
Your life is a prayer. You can live in that prayer of your life. Like, what is the most beautiful prayer that you could send somebody? If someone's poorly, we sit and we pray because we wish them health, and we wish them love, and we wish them, fulfillment or harmony or whatever it is. It's like we need to learn, I believe, also how to pray over our own lives. And that's okay. You deserve that. We're all worthy of that love.
Yeah.
We're not separate from that. And again, I think it's as soon as you become more in tune with your cycle as a woman, in your power, you start to become worthy. You start to realize your power, and you're like, yeah, this is great. And you know what? I'm going to pray for that.
Yeah.
Because I know that I'm here to experience life through that lens.
Yeah. So I feel so like I'm ending this episode so prematurely because I feel like there is so much I want to add on. But what I'm going to say, and I've said this to, I think, every single guest this season, is if you're up for it, I would love a part 2, because I feel that this is our beginning. This was a good starting point, and there is so many other avenues and kind of parts of this that we can delve into. So before we round off this episode, I ask every single guest the 3 questions, and it can be a recap of anything you've said before, something new you want to introduce. Like, the floor is yours. Okay. So first question, a piece of, I always call it like food for thought for our gorgeous listeners, something that you want to resonate with them, or your favorite quote. What do you want to leave us with?
I think the quote.
Okay.
And I don't know if listeners are going to resonate with this. They might think it's a bit like out there, but this, I believe, like my soul purpose on earth as a Magdalene womb healer. So, living through the teachings of Mary Magdalene has really been important for my womb work. I wouldn't be sat here helping women now learn about their cycle and their wombs, their power, if it wasn't for teaching through Mary Magdalene. It's also her feast day tomorrow. So I think like I should honor her as well and honor her teachings as such a beautiful high priestess woman. And there is a quote that I love. It's like a quote. So it's from Mary Magdalene's Gospel.
Okay.
Mary Magdalene's Gospel was ordered to be destroyed, right? So there was only actually 3 left. Okay. And they were found thousands of years later from caves where the monks had hidden them. Okay. And the reason they were being ordered to be destroyed is because of the power within the feminine healing and the feminine light that she possessed. She was a healer. She was a leader. And it proves she was a leader because she had the gospel.
Okay.
And in the gospel, Jesus says, a person does not see with the soul or the spirit. The person sees with the mind that exists between the two, and that is the person who sees the vision, right?
I'm like, I need to take this on.
So bear with me a moment. So the word mind that exists between the two, if you leave the word mind in the Greek, of how it actually means, it means the spiritual eye of the heart. We've been taught mind means up here.
Yeah.
But actually the mind means the spiritual eye of the heart. So what Jesus says there is it doesn't exist anywhere else other than the eye of your heart, and that is the person who sees the vision. It's like you can see through your eyes, but can you see through your heart?
Right.
And when you're able to see through your heart is when you're able to make decisions aligned from your heart. And Megan Watterson has a book called Mary Magdalene Revealed. And this is the quote that I wanted to leave everybody on because I think it's so powerful for us to start to remember. And also in honor of her and Mary Magdalene. And it says, if how we see, truly see, is not with eyesight, but is with a vision, a form of spiritual perception that allows us to know what is real, what is lasting, and what is truth, if this comes from within us, then no one has power over us.
I'm just gonna let that sit, okay? I'm not gonna add anything else because it's too powerful and I just need it to sit. Okay? So we're gonna leave that quote there and let people take that in because I feel like that needs space, and you actually gave us beautiful context before you dropped that with us. So I love that.
Amazing.
So if we're thinking then kind of, I guess, complete other side of it, what would be a practical tip you want to leave our listeners with?
A practical tip would be definitely starting to look at the relationship you have with your womb. So one thing you can do, which is a really beautiful way to connect to the womb, is you place your hands in a triangle and you turn it upside down. And this is a symbol of the Luna, and you just place it on your womb. That automatically sends a signal to like universe, your womb, like the codes, the feminine codes, everything. And so as soon as you do that mudra, it activates the womb space. So that's a really great tip. Even if you're just like going to sleep, or if you're on your period and you have some pains, just come down, do that symbol. And I would start to really ask what your relationship is like with your menstrual cycle. Do you worship it? And are you willing to choose change? Are you willing to do that? And if you're willing to do that, you will be supported,
I love that. Yeah. Okay, last but not least, what's either a book, a resource, a podcast, whatever it is, one thing that's helped you or something that you're a fan of that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I love The Power of Now book.
Eckhart Tolle, by the way, guys.
He's so good, and I love that he quotes Jesus in it. Like, I love that he quotes biblical references, because I think it really shows you've got such a powerful spiritual teacher who is not afraid of that. And I think it's so important, because biblical text is so powerful when you read it from a way of like poetry and helping us. I love that he quotes Jesus. So definitely The Power of Now for more of like the linear mind. If you want to start to learn about your kind of feminine or your cycle, I would go for perhaps something like Rise, Sister Rise by Rebecca Campbell, or maybe let's stick with Rise, Sister Rise from Rebecca Campbell.
You gave us loads there. I was like, thank you. Okay, we've got some beautiful, beautiful resources. I want to say the biggest thank you for your time, for your energy, for your presence. I alone have learned so much today, and I really hope this is a beautiful episode about something that perhaps we don't give like enough time and context. So I want to say a hell of a lot of gratitude and big thank you.
Thank you for having me. And thank you. Thank you.